welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and let's talk about my favorite deck that I lost every game with, or maybe I could say the deck that made me lose every game. Whatever I end up calling this video, I guess we'll find out after the fact. Basically, this is a cautionary tale, a little bit of deck building advice, a little bit of play advice as well, as far as how to play the Commander format, all of that sort of wrapped into one. And I'm giving this advice through talking about a deck that I used to have. That deck was my Tashar Ancestors Apostle deck, and I believe, if memory serves, this came out shortly after I started playing. Well, I guess I was playing Commander for about a year or two. Timeline I'm not exactly sure about, but I did not have a mono white deck. This was in the period of I was starting to transition away from more colors. Like a lot of people, I'm thinking, hey, more colors is better because I get to play more stuff. But this was in the era where I started transitioning to less colors, and I actually wanted to have a monocolored deck of every color, and mono white was one that I wanted. And this was actually my first mono white deck, funny enough. Tashar came out in Dominaria. Of course, there was an absolute ton of commanders from Dominaria, and this was just right up my alley. So 3 and a white bird cleric, 2/2 flying. Whenever you cast a historic spell, return target creature card with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard to the battlefield. Of course, introducing historic in this set. Artifacts, legendaries, and sagas are historic, and a lot of different ways you can go with this. I thought it was very open-ended, which I liked. It also was doing a very value-y theme, which I really like as well. So this was firing on all cylinders for me, so I immediately went after it. And my thinking was, okay, well, if I can do both things this guy wants to be doing, I could combine into one, right? So obviously, your commander wants you to be casting historic spells. Your commander also wants you to have creature cards with mana value 3 in your graveyard to get back. So to get maximum value here, I thought, why not have all of that combined into one? So in other words, I have creatures in the deck that not only are historic, are also mana value 3 or less, and also I can have them go to my graveyard, like a Bottle Gnomes, for example, right? There's a creature that is 3 mana value. It's fitting that criteria. It's also fitting the historic criteria because it is, of course, an artifact, and it is also fitting the criteria of I can easily put it in my graveyard because, of course, it has a sacrifice ability, right? I can sacrifice it to gain 3 life. So I can cast my Bottle Gnomes and trigger my commander, getting something else out of the graveyard, have my Bottle Gnomes come into play. I can sacrifice it to put it in my graveyard if I don't have anything there. Maybe I want to get something back, or maybe I just want to gain life. And that's it. I just filled the deck with lots of creatures like that. I had Brass Secretary in there, right? Sacrifice that guy. Goes to my graveyard. I get the draw card, Scarecrow, same thing. Lots of creatures like that, mostly artifact creatures, and lots of recycling where I had creatures go into the graveyard, get them back, sacrifice them to get effects, cast another one, so on and so forth. Of course, because I'm in a heavy artifact theme, I have some artifact support there, making it easier for me to cast my artifacts so I can really sort of go off on my turn. And I think people might be starting to realize what the issue is here. Now, I will point out there is some combo-y stuff that you can do with Tashar. I think that's the direction people ended up going, but this is very early on. I was right out of the gate there with Tashar. I was one of the first people playing it, and I wasn't doing any of that stuff. So we weren't at a point yet where Tashar was maybe considered combo-y or a combo commander. I was just playing a very value-y deck. Now the problem here, and why I was losing every game, and in fact, not only was I losing every game, but I was typically the first person knocked out of every game. That's how bad it was. Why? Because it looked like I was doing a lot of stuff, right? It looked like, oh, look at me. Look at all the stuff I'm doing on my turn, right? That is sort of the cautionary tale here, or the warning. Even if it isn't what you're actually doing, right? The psychology of commander players comes into this a whole lot. If I'm just sitting there doing a bunch of stuff on my turn, right? I cast my Bottle Gnomes, get back my Brass Secretary, sacrifice my Bottle Gnomes, cast, say, a Lieutenant Kirtar, another one I had on the deck, which was legendary, not an artifact, but it did trigger my commander, get back the brass secretary or the bottlenose, whatever I have in my graveyard, do that again, a lot of recycling, I'm doing lots of stuff, right? I'm not really doing that much. I'm drawing a couple cards, I'm gaining some life, I'm not doing anything fantastic. And in fact, that was a real quintessential deck with not really having a win con. I didn't really have a win con at all. That was essentially a white weenie deck. I just attacked with my little creatures to try and close out games. It was just me sitting there doing lots of stuff on my turn and not really having any way to win. But because I was doing lots of stuff on my turn, it was a combination of two issues that you will often have in a commander game. Issue number one is I'm just doing lots of stuff on my turn and I'm taking a long turn. People don't like that. And if people are seeing you taking a long turn, it can make you a target and people go after you, because if you're not in the game, then they don't have to sit through your 10-minute turn, right? That played into it a little bit. I think more so what played into it was the fact that I was just doing lots of stuff, and people can tend to have not great threat assessment in a commander game. And if people just see me doing lots of stuff on my turn, it doesn't really matter what I'm doing. I'm just doing lots of stuff, and that worries people, especially we get in a situation of sort of recycling cards and using stuff over and over again, right? That starts to worry people and make them sweat and think, uh-oh, what's coming next, So once I pass my turn after doing like 5 or 6 things on my turn where I get creatures back into my graveyard and cast and do this and that, now it's that guy's turn and he's like thinking, oh man, what's going to happen next here? Are we going to get to a point where this guy just goes infinite on his turn? So why not knock him out so I don't have to worry about him anymore, right? So this deck, even though I was doing something I would say was very innocent and non-threatening in a commander game, because of what I was doing, I guess it maybe reminded people of other things that could be happening in the deck or worried people about what could be happening in the deck. And so for that reason, I was very much a target a lot, and I got knocked out of games really fast. I never won a single game with this deck. I love this deck. I had tons of fun with it. Again, it was right up my alley, doing exactly what I like to do in a game of Magic in general, I would say. And I did have it together for quite a while, even though I lost every single game. Again, I would say probably like 80% of the games I was likely the first person knocked out, just because I worried people with what I was doing, even though my deck wasn't threatening at all. And despite the fact that I lost every game, I kept it together because I really enjoyed it a whole lot. But eventually it's like, okay, at some point you just have to call it quits and be like, all right, regardless of the fact that my deck isn't very threatening, what I'm doing in my deck just worries people, and it always makes me a target and it makes it so that I'm just not really having any fun, So I eventually took it apart for that reason. It is also important with when you're playing your deck, and I will give another example here that happened to me recently with my Lulu deck. One of the cards in that deck is Goblin Welder. It's one of my favorite cards in the game of Magic, and it fits perfectly in there because, of course, it's already a really powerful card that you can do some really nutty things with. It is a little bit of an artifact theme. I would say it's kind of a lot of an artifact theme. Combination of artifact theme and tapping on tapping. It's kind of a weird combination, but it works really good there. And of course, it works extra good with Goblin Welder because artifact theme, and also it's a creature that's tapping. And of course, my Goblin Welder will also trigger my commander's ability on the end step, that essentially revolt trigger, right? So it all works really, really great there. And I can have my Goblin Welder give me some value and then on tap on my end step so I can use it again on my opponent's turn. And, mostly with that card, I'm just get a sad robot out of my graveyard, go grab a land, sacrifice my Ichor Wellspring, draw a card, just good value. But if I'm doing that again and again and again, getting lands, drawing cards, all of that stuff, even though it's not super scary, people can see all the stuff you're doing. And what ended up happening to me in that last game is, I'm doing that in the deck already, but because I was doing it a lot, it made me a target, and I ended up being the first person knocked out of that game. I made the mistake. I didn't take my own advice. I did too much stuff without actually winning. I suppose if you actually ended up winning the game or getting to a place where you have a massive advantage where it doesn't matter if you become a target, that makes it okay. But if you're not going to be doing that, you really have to restrain yourself and hold off. So a little bit of deck building advice, but also a little bit of game playing advice as well. That's the takeaway from this video mostly, is just be careful when you are playing the game. Sure, taking long turns, doing lots of stuff, but also if in your deck building process, if you're building a deck where you're just going to be doing a whole lot of stuff on your turn and bringing attention to yourself, obviously if I'm just going to play a land and pass turn, no one's going to be paying attention to me. I don't recommend doing that either. It's not a whole lot of fun, but you got to get in the middle ground. If you do too much on your turn, even if it's not that threatening, even if it's just value he plays, you are going to make yourself a target and people are going to come after you. So be careful of that with both playing and deck building. You guys let me know in the comments below if you have ever had a problem like this with a deck of yours. That is it for today though, and thanks for tuning in.